Hi everyone, it is day 45 of my live 77-day video challenge, Heart and Soul with Evelyn. I am going to continue talking about the late 80s when I was living in Germany. I was living in Grossenbuseck, which is near Frankfurt, probably about 45 minutes from Frankfurt, living my life in West Germany, having a great time. I was in my early 20s, working at a military bank. However, not far from where I was at, there was a lot of controversy going on with with the East Germans and even people in the Eastern communist states. They were unhappy with what was going on in their countries. And Hungary, even in April 1989, opened its borders. And then that kind of was the start of just the Eastern European just being unhappy with the economics of what was going on. Also, Mikhail Gorbachev, he was being more open, letting the citizens express their freedom, and so it was getting a time where it was getting a bit complicated for the Eastern European, and communism, it looked like it was starting to fall. Now, during this time, late in 1989, I was hanging out with my girlfriend Christiana, who's German, and we just were talking. We weren't really talking about the current events. We were just talking about our lives. How, oh God, wouldn't it be great to be a flight attendant? And then so she started saying something to me about, Lufthansa is hiring. Why don't we both apply for Lufthansa? And I said, oh no, my German's not good enough for that, and I'm not a German citizen, so I won't be able to do that. However, about a month later, so this was kind of like in June of 1989, there was an advertisement in the newspaper. They were looking for flight attendants who could speak English and German for Delta Airlines. And I thought, oh my goodness, that sounds like me. And I think the airlines, they kind of did a big push for hiring flight attendants because they could foresee that there were things happening in Eastern Europe and they needed to fly more routes. So I think that's why they had this big sort of push for flight attendants. So I ended up applying for Delta, and they said I needed to go to Atlanta to interview for the job, which I thought was fantastic. Now, also at the same time, there were all these different things going on in Berlin. Berlin almost kind of the same time. So in October of 1989, I did fly over to America because a friend of mine from my university days, from Phi Chi Theta, she ended up getting married. So here's a photo of her and my Phi Chi Theta family there. I've got my little sister is Flor right there. I've got Knox, my little brother, and then of course Michelle was. All these people here were in Phi Chi Theta. So it was a really good sort of a reunion. But I had just interviewed with Delta Airlines before I went to the wedding, which was in McAllen, Texas, which is right on the Mexican border there. So I ended up interviewing, and they told me, they let me know like right away, within a week I was still in America, that I got the job. And I was like, wow. And they said I could start, right away, do training in November. However, I was still working at the military bank, so I needed to give them 6 weeks notice. Can you imagine? 6 weeks notice, which is, I guess, fair enough. So I gave them 6 weeks notice, and that would mean that I could start sometime in January. So I indeed started in January of 1990. 29th of January 1990 was the day that I started training at Atlanta for Delta Airlines. So with the historical things that were going on, I think the airlines really, they thought, well, we're going to need flight attendants, who could speak German or, other languages. And that's what they were really looking for flight attendants who could speak different languages. And also during this time is when the Berlin Wall it came down. So when I went back to America, when I went back to Germany after my October trip in America, where I interviewed and I went to the wedding, that is when everything started happening in Berlin. So I'm going to talk about that tomorrow, but it was a really exciting time so that you could feel there were changes going on. So through the things that were going on at the Berlin Wall, and them needing more German speakers, and projecting that, oh my goodness, people are going to start traveling more, we're going to need people who speak German. So that's how I was hired. So that's another story. But I'm so glad you're here. I could see that someone is online. Thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it. And I do appreciate when people watch a little bit later. If you have any questions, please ask in the chat. Sometimes I get a bit excited and probably haven't explained it clearly, but I would love any sort of feedback. I love feedback. Hey, I'm a Toastmaster. I love feedback. So yes, so this is day 45. I can't believe it. Day 45 of my live video day challenge. This is Evelyn, Heart and Soul with Evelyn. Until tomorrow.